This episode of the Craftsmen Online podcast is sponsored by Bricks Masons. From elegant Masonic rings that showcase your commitment to our craft to finely crafted regalia and apparel that honor your tradition, Bricks Masons delivers quality and craftsmanship that truly stands out. Shop now at bricksmasons.com and use promo code CRAFTSMAN, that's CRAFTSMEN, to receive free shipping with your first order.
The comments, opinions, and views shared during this program are of those individual Freemasons and do not reflect the official position of a Grand Lodge, Concordant Body, Appendant Body, Masonic Authority, or CraftsmenOnline.com. Welcome to the Craftsmen Online podcast, the only 5-star rated Masonic podcast endorsed by the Grand Lodge of New York. And now your host, Worshipful Brother, Michael Arce.
And welcome back. You've joined us for an episode on the Craftsmen Online Reading Room. It's one of my favorite things that we do here at Craftsmen Online. We get together 4 times a year now and invite you to come and sit down with our panel virtually through Zoom meetings and have an open discussion on a select chapter of a book by a Masonic author. On Tuesday, January 30th at 7 o'clock, our reading room doors open for the group to get together and talk about Mackey's Symbolism on Freemasonry. Specifically, we focused around Chapter 31, The Lost Word. Our panel for the evening was hosted by Right Worshipful Bill Edwards and Very Worshipful Michael LaRocco, and the panelists included Brother Jason Short and Right Worshipful Cliff Jacobs. The cool thing about our reading rooms is they are open to anyone who has an interest in Freemasonry now, and we even provide an excerpt of the selection that we'll be reading. So if you want to catch up with us, our next reading room, mark this down on your calendar, will be Tuesday, April 30th at 7 o'clock Eastern. We'll be meeting, and our group for that night is going to be the same cast of characters: Right Worshipful Cliff Jacobs, Brother Jason Short, and of course the panel hosted by Right Worshipful Bill Edwards and Very Worshipful Michael LaRocco. They'll be diving into a selection from Manly P. Hall's Secret Teachings of All Ages, exploring the Freemasonry Symbolism chapter. If you want to get this reading material, you can go visit us on CraftsmenOnline.com or open up the show notes for this podcast episode. Oh, guess what? The link is right there. All right, without any further ado, I'm going to hand over the talking stick to Right Worshipful Bill Edwards, who will guide us through the program.
So tonight we're going to be exploring Mackey's Symbolism of Freemasonry. Albert Mackey was a Mason who wrote this book back in February of 1869. So one of the things that's fascinating to me about Freemasonry is you have a book that was written 150 years ago, over 150 years ago, that is still relevant today. And we're going to be discussing the last chapter, the 31st chapter, on the symbolism of the lost word. So I'd like to jump in and ask our panelists, what is your reaction to Mackey's interpretation of the symbol of the lost word? And in that chapter, are there any specific statements that jumped out to you?
My thoughts are that, the lost word is what Alfred Hitchcock would call a MacGuffin. The lost word is almost like a ruse, because for me, the most important part of the phrase in the search for the lost word is the word search. That's the verb that kicks things off, that gets you moving, that gets you to look. And, Mackey, uses a lot of words to say something that I think is rather simple. And I think it's the process. In some ways, it doesn't matter what you're searching for. It'd be the Holy Grail, the lost Ark of the Covenant. The most important thing is that you search, because in searching, you actually discover things about yourself. It's an internal thing that happens. Because if you get the lost word, then what? So I think it's a process. It's a journey. It's not the destination. For me, that's the essence. And getting a substitute for the lost word, I think, is a way of kind of appeasing you so that you continue the search. So that, okay, this is the substitute. Okay, well, I'll keep looking for the real word. But the whole idea is to be that verb, search. And in the searching is when you are transformed. Those are my thoughts.
I guess my reaction to Mackey's interpretation was, well, First, it comes from just my reaction to his writing. Like, I have a lot of respect for Mackey. I mean, he's a contemporary of Pike, and you can see in both of their work, they really like to put words down onto paper. I don't know if they were getting paid per word, but it's like ordering a burger and getting a burger with way too much filling on it, and you got to pick and choose until you get down to the bun, the burger, and just what you want to put in your mouth to understand what it is he's trying to say in every paragraph. But with that, he does a really good job of summarizing the Judeo-Christian aspect of the craft, and I do agree with the clip that it's really the search for the word, or the lost word in Mackey's interpretation being divine truth. I can really get on board with. One specific statement that he makes, kind of towards the end of the chapter, that I really enjoyed, is labor, said the old monks, is worship. Labor este ore, which in Latin is work is to pray. And thus in our lodges, we worship, working for the word, working for the truth, ever looking forward, casting no glance behind, but cheerily hoping for the consummation and the reward of our labor in the knowledge which is promised to him who plays no laggard's part. And I just found that is such a good summation of our work as Masons, being in search of the divine truth, and leading our lives along a pathway that will eventually lead us to the attainment of that.
So I just had a wild thought, because I had no idea Rochelle Cliff was going to start off that way. And I was wondering that it seems like it's the search itself that motivates us to embark on that journey and to discover. And to play the devil's advocate, it is also at some point the actual barrier to discover, where when you get as close to the truth as you can get, there has to be sort of a leap of faith. And it's almost like the mind wants to keep searching, and you might be the truth might be right in front of you, and then we just keep on searching right past the truth. This famous author had said, because in the mind there are only questions, but in the heart only answers. And so maybe that's why the lost word is lost. One, to search for, and two, to realize that it's not going to be grasped with the mind, and it shouldn't be something pronounceable or put into a belief system that you commoditize or whatever. Here's a quote from the book, and I'm looking for your response to the quote. Here it is. What then is the design of Freemasonry? A very large majority of its disciples, looking only to its practical results, as seen in the everyday business of life, to the noble charities which is to the tears of widows which have dried, to the cries of orphans which have hushed, to the wants of the destitute which it has supplied arrived with too much rapidity at the conclusion that charity, and that too in its least exalted sense, is elementary aid, is the great design, the institution. What is your reaction to that?
This is like a really great example of what I meant by ordering the burger and like having it packed with a lot of stuff that isn't just the burger. I mean, I love how Mackey writes. He really pours his emotion and his thought and his feeling, his intentions there. But really what he's saying is a very, very large majority of the Masonic disciples arrive at the conclusion that charity, in its least exalted sense, is the great design of the institution. And absolutely, I think that there are many that find that philanthropic aspect of the craft to be, if not the central component. However, out of context, I do think that this quote misses the point Mackey is driving home here. And It's really in the following paragraphs that he points out. Many too find the social cements to be social sentiments to be the cement that binds the craft together. But then makes his point that yes, although brotherly love and relief or charity are two principal tenets, that a third principal tenet of truth is equally as important. And so then really the bigger question that Mackey puts forth at the beginning of this quote, and what is the design of Freemasonry? I think the design then goes on to the idea of finding the balance between the three of those things, and that attainment may be divine truth. That the divine truth then speaks to all three of those aspects, and a truly balanced life might lead you to that practice. Of course, he goes on throughout the chapter to expand on this specific quote and breaking out primitive Freemasonry, spurious Freemasonry, and the combination of the two into temple masonry. And then to list that the Freemasonry, the design of it is that it's a science which is engaged in the search of that divine truth. So that's my reaction.
It kind of reminds me a little bit. I'm sorry to bring him up, but one of Crowley's books, it said the aim of religion, but the method of science. And I think that's what a lot of what Freemasonry is about. It gives us as Jason pointed out, it's sort of almost like a scientific methodology. But the goal is similar to the goal of what I suppose religion is supposed to do for us.
Yeah, there's a lot of loquacious sentences that you forget. And in the very beginning, it says that the majority of its disciples looking only, and then he lists all these things. It's easy to misunderstand. And all those things that he's mentioning is what he's alluding is not potentially the true design. That it's not just the external things. It's not just that charity. It's not just all these things. But he only uses a couple of little words, and then he lulls you to sleep with the other stuff.
Yeah, he really confounds himself sometimes when you're reading him. It's hard to stay focused. That critical nugget that he has there is that it's this threefold aspect that leads to divine truth.
To build on that, Jason, I think it's important because if we're just focused on truth through the quest, right, it's all about myself. And you can lose yourself in that. And even though it's important, at the same time, then having that foundation in the brotherhood, it's forcing you to think outside yourself to be part of something with others. And then charity or service calls you to also think about outside of yourself. So I think both of those in a way can temper the search, because ultimately, truth being a symbol, we're probably not going to find it, right? We're going to get close to it, but there's always going to be that veil. So in that quest or that passion to find it, it also then reminds us the importance to temper that with the charity, to temper that with the brotherhood, that we're not in this alone. So I find that as a reminder that it's not only that, but they're of value as well. So it's not, as you said, it's not an either or, it's an and, that they all can add value to the quest.
Yeah, and it occurred to me, right, Worshipful Bill, it's kind of leads to the 24-inch gauge. I know this is open, so we won't dive into it a bunch, but there is a methodology that's presented to even the most fresh initiates that I think leads then to the eventual conclusion that it does take that combination of community, self, and the divine.
Interesting connection. I had not made that before, but right, if you think about it, it's that sort of threefold kind of three dimensions of things. And that's interesting. Thank you. We've touched on this some as far as the reaction to it, but how do you personally interpret the legend and symbol of the lost word? Jason, if you want to go first.
Yeah, sure. I'm personally more or less I'm on board with Mackey's interpretation. I mean, for me, it's allegorically, I think that divine truth and that the legend does pertain to the fall of man away from nature. That when we lost our original language, which we had with plants, animals, and spirit, and turned our attention as humanity towards mastery of the material world, we lost the connection to that initial flame that was within us. The legend kind of then, in Mackey's interpretation of it that I'm on board with, pertaining to primitive masonry and spurious masonry, then I put it into Genesis and seeing how the 10 generations of Adam leading up to Noah were connected to that original union with plant, animal, and nature under the careful eye of the divine. Even though Adam was ejected from the garden, he was still endowed with that initial working covenant. And the primitive Masons, who after the Great Flood went on to building the Tower of Babel out of brick and with mortar of tar, the word was then eventually lost as God came down and decided to confound their speech and spread them out throughout the world. In Mackey's interpretation, he holds fast to this idea that even through that, primitive masonry survived, and it mixed with the spurious masons of the diffused population, who then were reunited at the building of the temple. But allegorically gets to this idea that even if in our life, and even within our own spiritual temple, if we were to attain an enlightened sense, or if we were to master ourselves, we may come close to understanding divine truth, but we are only in this physical self capable of understanding a substitute for it. And it is not until we actually are reunited with our maker that we attain the complete revelation, and the veil is drawn back in total, which would be, our finding, our recovery of the lost word, in essence.
Someday I'd like to limit the discussion to at least 14th degree Scottish Rite Masons and Holy Royal Arch Masons to have a more complete discussion on my interpretation of the legend and the symbol of the lost word.
In reading it, I also it also brings to mind a little bit Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey, because I think we have to go on the quest. In order to do that, you have to leave the community and embark on this journey. In this case, to find a lost word. But I also think that to complete the cycle, you have to return to the community with the knowledge and wisdom that you gain, and share it with the community. So I don't think it's something that's just for the individual. It benefits the community when you return, and the return is part of that hero's journey.
I think an important piece of information that has changed the way I look at masonry is a lot of our legends that our rituals touch upon are allegories for something else. And part of the motivation for creating legends, and some of them are actually unique to Freemasonry itself, is to protect us. There was earlier versions of the degrees that touched upon other legends that shared with other religions, that they thought we might get persecuted if we continue in those, that another religion would have to copyright on a legend, like using Noah and stuff. The thought was that it would be able to, the Catholic Church would have a copyright on Noah, so leave it alone. And so there was thought involved in creating these legends as allegories to parallel these, universally thought out journeys and trying to discover what the truth was. It's one of the reasons why, too, you might see the difference between the American ritual and the more the French version, like the ones that Garibaldi do and the other lodges. They decided to take the alchemy out so that the Western society wouldn't freak out too much and persecute us. I remember, a friend of mine felt really bad when he found out that some of these things were legend, that they weren't actually true. I told him, she says, you don't get it. This is, the story that we're telling, the legend that we're telling, is expressing a much more higher level spiritual truth than any kind of historical, event that took place. And so we're pointing at spiritual truths. So we use our own legend to do that, so we don't get into conflict with, theological controversies or dogmatic conflict.
The Craftsmen Online podcast is now sponsored by BricksMasons.com, our favorite destination for all of our Masonic shopping needs. Whether it's apparel for yourself or a cool gift idea for another brother, make BricksMasons.com your online marketplace where tradition meets innovation. I'm seriously counting down the weekends until the warm weather returns and I can get back to spending time outdoors in my backyard, just taking in the comfort of my deck while listening to this podcast or my favorite songs. But here's going to be a cool twist with a new Bluetooth outdoor speaker. Now, this is IPX6 certified. It's a weatherproof speaker. You can take it anywhere, a hiking trip, head on, no problem. Its compact size also comes with a carboner clip and micro USB charging cable, now making this the ideal companion for when your favorite tunes take you exploring. The Bluetooth working range is about 33 feet. Your battery's going to last for over 2 hours, and that's the music at max volume. Get the soundtrack of your summer started now with a customized Bluetooth speaker with our Blue Lodge and our Concordant Bodies logos available for under $30 at BricksMasons.com. Visit BricksMasons.com and explore their extensive catalog. Elevate your Masonic experience with style and substance. Plus, Craftsmen Online podcast listeners use promo code CRAFTSMEN, that's CRAFTSMEN, at checkout to enjoy free shipping with your first order.
God in the soul, the unity of the one, and the immortality of the other.
Yeah, I mean, in so many words, yes. I think that Mackey illustrates a touchstone of the craft here, that the quest to attain unity with God and the reintegration with our immortal soul is the very foundation of the spiritual temple. It's sort of the very point of the first degree to align brethren with these principles, and then the second to orient them towards being able to better understand and call to mind the wisdom associated with these great truths. And then the third allows them to make the symbolic leap of body and mind necessary for actually reintegrating into a higher state of consciousness. Mackey's definitely onto something here.
That also resonates with me. And the idea of that again, making that stone foundation of the spiritual temple, that house not made with hands, and the idea that we're builders, right? And that we're perfecting and improving ourselves. So, and then that idea of then looking for that, as Jason said, that reintegration, right? Of reconnecting. So I think he captures the essence of it. One thing that he did mention, as far as we talk about the quest, and he views the 3 degrees as that journey as well. And he said that it becomes a symbol of personal progress of a candidate from his first initiation to the completion of his course when he receives a full development of the mysteries. So again, how he ties into the idea of going through the 3 degrees helps us in that progress. And we touched on this briefly. Masonry is often explained as being primarily a morality school, reinforcing what good men already know. But the legend and symbol of the lost word take us to a different dimension. We've talked some about that, but do you have any concluding thoughts with that?
I would imagine that maybe Mackey was familiar with the Kabbalah. And I think when you look at the glyph of the Tree of Life, and we're down here in the material world in Malkuth. And I think we spoke about, Jason mentioned reintegration, which is the central philosophy of Martinism. So I think down here in Malkuth, we need to work our way back up to at least Tippereth or Kether. Plus, that doesn't come until after you've left this, physical plane. But I think, in Masonry, we are given the impetus to kind of reunite with the Godhead and become more fully realized. And I think that's what Masonry attempts to do in its lessons that it teaches us.
And side note, I really have to give Right Worshipful Cliff credit for prior conversation we had. He brought reintegration into play, and it really helped to solidify some of my own philosophical understanding of the craft. So just kudos to you, Cliff. I love you. I believe that, beyond Masonry being a morality school, there is certainly a lot more dimension there, and that dimension becomes a lot more accessible when we see this allegory, when we're presented with this idea of a lost word. I think it's also obviously inspired some of the affiliated body, Royal Arch, and the 14th degree, like Michael had spoke to before, and I believe the 13th as well. There's a lot to uncover there. I know that the presentation in the 3rd degree and this idea that, well, I guess we shouldn't, we're not tiled, so we can't get too deep into it, but I'll circle back to a point that we had explored earlier, and it's not just the brotherly love aspect or the charity aspect, but it's the attainment and balance of charity, brotherly love, and truth that help us to create the 3 dimensions of Masonry, I guess you could say. I think it helps when we start to really work in our own lives as Masons to attain that balance in our life, that it philosophically aligns us on a path towards spiritual enlightenment, but B, even passively elevates us as individuals to become closer to the divine, to that reintegration with the Godhead.
Yeah, one of the things that that came to me about Masonry that made me discover that there is a deeper dimension to Masonry and gave it full credence was when I started to recognize, and it really was in conversations with brothers, and one of them's on the call right now with Steve Stephanakis, was that I was very much studying prior to Masonry a lot of mysticism, and it seemed like Masonry had a missing component that the whole world picture didn't have. So it's not giving you a dogma, a set of beliefs to explain reality. It's also not giving you the practices of, let's say, like Hinduism or Buddhism or Christian prayer and meditation, where you actually have this discovery, And so all the mysticisms seem to, maybe this is an overgeneralization, say that you have this direct experience where you experience your unity with God, and or that you go inside yourself deep enough to meditation or spiritual practice, and you discover that there's a place inside you where there's no longer any you, all there is God. But Masonry seems to teach this in a very uniquely different way. Instead of in books and practices and in dogma, it shows us through ceremony the symbols in which we get to recognize and interpret for wherever our subconscious could pick it up from. Paul Jung, in his book Alchemy and Psychology, said that he got to a place with certain patients where he had to abandon traditional analysis, and he had to start using symbols to access the archetypes in the collective unconscious. So it seems like Masonry gives you a direct look at it, and it tells you, like, you could have your own dogma in your own practice, please do that. But this is just like the third missing part to the whole thing. And so I think Masonry becomes whatever the person and whatever the culture needs it to be. And it just has an infinite depth to it because we're talking in symbols, right? And a lot of people get into a lot of esoteric discussions with their coordinate bodies, but the truth is, by far, the most esoteric degrees are the first three because they're completely symbolic. These are the symbolic degrees. Mm-hmm. And so, there's so much. Most of what's being taught is not in what's said in the verbal part of the ritual. It's in the visual of what we're doing. A lot of the physical way of speaking, I don't want to say too much.
When we talk about the substitute word, and he doesn't focus on that, one of the things that came to mind for me is that we talk about the allegory of Plato's cave, right? So that's that idea of we're in the cave and we don't really see, that's that substitute understanding because we don't have the understanding of what actually is. But on the other way of it, it's also useful to us to have that substitute word. It aids us in our journey, and Cliff alluded to this, but we also have to realize that it's incomplete. Mm-hmm. And because it's incomplete doesn't mean that there isn't value to it, that the substitute word can be what we learned, and it can be that culmination of experience and knowledge that's aiding us to helping us on our journey, on that quest. So it is useful. It's just also understanding that it's incomplete.
Yeah, to add on that too, without revealing too much. I mean, I always walked away with the sense that the substitute word really also lays out that there's the creator is also the destroyer. It really ties together the whole of the human experience. My other thought that is nagging at me is that without the dimension of the lost word, without that added bonus, if you will, from the third degree, it might as well just be Boy Scouts or another social organization. And that dimension, the critical point here is that it does work to elevate its practitioners to a higher state of being.
I really like what Dr. James Tresna, God rest his soul, from the Valley of Guthrie, Oklahoma. He was brilliant, and this was his interpretation. He said he believed the substitute word was religion, and that will only take you so far. And every theologian will agree that the last step is only between you and God, a personal experience that cannot be put in words. And that's why the word is enough. Let's read the last. This really ties in not only the discussion and where we just wound up and what less words that Bill said, but last night at the School of Instruction, one of the things we touched upon was the funeral ceremony and its deeper meaning. But work as we will, this symbolic word, this knowledge of divine truth, is never thoroughly attained in this life or in its symbol, the Master Mason Lodge. The corruptions of mortality which encumber and cloud the human intellect, hide it as with a thick veil from mortal eyes. It is only, as we have just said, beyond the tomb, and when released from the earthly burden of life, that man is capable of fully receiving and appreciating the revelation.
If the quest for divine truth is the foundation of our spiritual temple, then death would be the capstone. Like, the romantic in me wants to believe that it would be possible for one wholly illuminated individual to be able to attain this without death. However, the realist in me feels that our mortality limits us to experiencing the three-dimensional space through 2D lenses, and we're limited to by only the common bodily senses and a linear perception of time. So man is only then capable of fully receiving and appreciating the revelation through that final trip to that country where we never come back from.
I don't know. I think you can certainly get a at least a glimpse of that divine um, revelation through certain spiritual practices um, and not only practice but in a practical way. So I do think there are opportunities given to us where we can get a glimpse of that divine revelation. Depending on how you approach it. Um, I think just a thought I had. When I became a Mason, when I took my third degree, I thought it was going to be like, let's make a deal. And door number 3 was going to open, and there was just going to be this huge revelation, and it didn't happen. And I was like a little disappointed. And then, after some time, I realized that what I had obtained was a key. Masonry wasn't the door necessarily, but it did provide me with a key that I was then able to open other doors and get more of the revelation than what Masonry could have given me at that time.
Yeah, I really love the idea as well, right, Worshipful Cliff, that we can get glimpses of it. And I think there are legends of certain sages who certainly were wholly illuminated. We look at Enoch, for instance, who attained this without death, or Buddha, who was wholly illuminated. But I think that at least with Buddha, he understood that the work in which he was engaged in life was limited by primary physical being, and it wasn't until after death that he was able to take his second form, like this body of intense joy, where he was able to then resonate eternally throughout the cosmos, this immense spiritual power. And I think that's part of the key of the divine truth, that we might be able to access it. We might even be able to engage with our spiritual self and have a position as this resonant divine being within the eternal. But it's not until we fully integrate into it that we come into understanding it in total.
One of the things that pops up for me is it depends what we call death, right? In the funeral ceremony, the most repeated phrase is, there is no death. And then at the very end, it says we go from life to life. And so there used to be a phrase that was in the Eleusinian mysteries that Christianity inherited, and it's in St. Paul's chapel somewhere. It says, if you die before you die, when you die, you will not die. What that means to me, what I think I get out of the degrees, is that true identity is the immortal soul. If you ever read the beginning of the Grand Lodge of New York's Constitution, which is 99% extremely boring law, right? Important, but litigious. It lists our beliefs, and 3 of the many beliefs is, get this: God is one, man is immortal, character determines destiny. Did you ever hear of a document or a belief or anyone else ever say man is immortal? No, they always say man is mortal. Man is immortal. So if we could shift our identity to this body-mind entity, to our real self, which is an immortal spirit, and there's no name for it also, then we're free. We've often talked on several of these reading nights that we talked about reintegration, regeneration, reincarnation. A lot of people didn't like the term reincarnation. But if you understand quantum physics with E equals mc squared, what it's basically saying is that physical reality and the energy that is its source are absolutely identically one. It's only our perception. And there have been many examples. Take, for instance, the victims of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, where they saw the relationship between energy and matter shift very dramatically before their eyes. and as well as people having near-death experiences and seeing apparitions, and or people walking on fire. The Tony Robbins seminar, not burning their feet, and the ones that have doubt get their feet burned and stuff. So there's many representations of this relationship between energy and matter. So if Masonry, through inculcation, which is learning through repetition, and a degree system is teaching us who and what we really are, pure divine spirit, and that the physical body, you don't take a new body, you really get a new body every year. It's only a matter of the food that you ate. 98% of the atoms and molecules in your body the last year's food that you ate. And so it's this constant reproducing. But it's a projection in Hinduism and Buddhism. It's a projection of your own mind. And then you interpret this energy as physical matter. And that's what the double slit experiment, the quantum physics reveals, and a whole bunch of other physics talks.
Brothers, do you remember how you felt when you were first called to Freemasonry? The excitement of each degree? If you can still feel that call of the East, you're encouraged to apply to join the Scottish Rite Northern Masonic jurisdiction. The Scottish Rite offers Master Masons like you an opportunity to continue your Masonic journey and delve deeper into our craft through their 29 degrees. And there's an easy way to join the Scottish Rite. It's called Join the Rite Night, a virtual initiation where you can witness the requisite 4th degree and officially become a Scottish Rite Mason. There's 7 opportunities to join online from February 1st to April 25th. Here's what you do. Visit the Scottish Rite online at srnmj.us and click on the Join button. You can also join in person at a Scottish Rite reunion near you. Your journey to the 32nd degree in Freemasonry awaits. Take the first step at srnmj.us and click on the Join button today.
Brother Arcee, if you have any questions that came in?
We do. We have one question from Brother Rodney McGilvary. He's got a question on the Hebrew Tetragrammaton, so get ready.
Good evening, brethren. I'm Rodney McGilvary from Fort Wayne, Indiana, Leo Lodge number 224. And I was wondering what your thoughts are on the Hebrew Tetragrammaton in relation to the lost word in Freemasonry. The ancient Hebrews believed that if you could pronounce the true name of God, you would not exist anymore. So the Hebrews kind of had a substitute word, which was the Tetragrammaton, which in higher degrees of Freemasonry, when you go to the York Rite side, somewhat in the Scottish Rite side as well, you will find this Tetragrammaton. So that's my question. What are your thoughts on?
Glad you brought it up, because I'm confused about that too, because when it first appears, not when it first appears, but when it first started to a human being is in Exodus chapter 3, verse 14 to Moses, when Moses says, okay, they're going to ask me what your name is, God. What do I tell them? And he says the name, right? He says, I am that I am. Tell them I am sent me to you. Several hundred times he says, tell them my name is I am. Okay, now that's the English interpretation. That's not really pronunciation, right? But that's what the English translation says. By the time you get to Leviticus, it converts to no, whoever says it should die, because no one is pure enough to utter it in public. Okay, there's actually a discussion that's why Jesus was crucified, is because he uttered the name in the temple, because he says I am. When they said, are you the Messiah? And he says I am, and he was speaking Hebrew in the temple. And so, but I don't know why it got to the point where you're not allowed to say. I don't know if it's a misinterpretation of what the word really means and what it's supposed to do. But in the beginning, God is telling Moses to tell them my name, to say it out loud. And it doesn't seem to have a negative effect. But then I guess eventually it evolves into, they didn't believe anybody was pure enough to utter the name, to the point where when Yom Kippur evolved, where the high priest once a year goes in, that's the curtain in its sanctum sanctorum, and while he's uttering the word 10 times, they're clashing cymbals and gongs so that no one can hear the name and also be destroyed. Oh yeah, I don't know why, how that belief changed. Maybe someone can enlighten me on why and how it happened. I heard different views, but I still don't understand why. To me, I think using the word in what it really means, which I don't think we could discuss here, is the most liberating, exciting truth ever to be discovered. But and then why is it hidden? I don't know. Maybe it's blocking from unworthy people using it. I don't know.
I guess I kind of look at it. I'm looking, I guess, backwards, sort of like 2020. What interests me is how you can take the tetragrammaton and make it a pentagram by inserting the Hebrew letter shin in it, and it kind of biblically kind of in some ways moves you from the Old Testament into the New Testament. So I see it as part of a larger puzzle as a whole. If I could just go back and just say a couple of more words, and I hope I don't get in trouble for what I'm about to say. The tetragrammaton, four-letter word, it speaks to what's known as the quaternary principle. So it's interesting when you look at how God is referred to in different languages. We have Deus in Latin, we have Dios in Spanish, we have Gott, G-O-T-T in German, we have Theo in Greek. So you'll find that in a lot of different languages, the name of God consists of four letters. You even have our version in Christianity of Inri. So I think it's the power of the four, or the quaternary principle, which also, when you look at our Masonic apron, it's a triangle over a square. It's 3/4. So I think if you look into that, you might find some interesting things.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Brother Michael. It brought up something that Right Marshal Clifford mentioned earlier, and going through the 3 degrees, you had an expectation of being fixed, basically, and it didn't happen. And that's one of the reasons I went into York Rite and to Scottish Rite, was because they promised the word. Well, I was given the word, and I still wasn't magically transformed in any way. And that sort of helped me get into the esoteric aspect of it. And I think that what Brother LaRocco was talking about earlier, I think is one of the big losses that we have in Freemasonry, is that we don't give people in the very beginning the thought process that this is all just a play. In other words, going back to what Brother Jason was saying earlier, there's all these different options, all these different opportunities. And really, to me, Masonry is just getting to that doorway. And then you find the rabbit hole that helps you get to a certain transition point. And then when you finish that rabbit hole, you find another rabbit hole. I really think that that's part of what it is. I think part of the answer to Brother Rodney's question, I think Brother Clifford addressed it a little bit earlier. To me, the substitute word, it's sort of like when you go fishing, and before you throw the fishing line out, you chum the water a little bit to keep them interested. In other words, you want those fish coming in. Well, it's the same way with the substitute word. If they promised the real word and we didn't get something emotionally from it right away, is they got to throw something out on the water. They got to throw some chum out to keep me coming back in, all the time to do everything that you need to do. So I think that there was a lot of intelligence in creating that whole thing, but it really is not an intellectual process. I mean, reading the Mackey's work, it's pretty simple, that the divine word, seeking the lost word, is simply getting our soul aligned with God. And that's really as simple as it is. And based on your personality, you have to go through either this rabbit hole or that rabbit hole, or a lot of intellectual. But I think the challenge that we get into is making it too intellectual. And it really is just continuing on the path. And our 3 degrees, what's the question that's always asked? What are you seeking? Light, more light. Okay. In other words, the whole thing is never give up the search for light. And I think that we degrade the fraternity when we tell people, hey, we've got the word. All you have to do is take this degree and we have the word, which goes back to what Right Marshal Clifford was saying, is you get to that word and it's like, oh my God, what happened? What did I miss? I must have missed something here. And it's, I think that we, like Brother LaRocco was saying earlier, or I think what he was alluding to is we have to get more honest with people up front about the fact that these are just morality plays, and take from it what you want and find a proper person to help lead you through it. I mean, there was like 3 different rabbit holes that you guys brought up tonight that I need to contact somebody about afterwards, for some clarification, which is the wonderful part about doing this. Thank you, Brother RC, again. But I think it's a lot simpler than what we sometimes put out. In other words, it really simply is, I need to get my soul in alignment with God, period.
I think we have one more question, Ziad.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for putting this together. It's actually very interesting. Not only the author, but also the topic. And I'm sure I agree with a lot of the comments and very thoughtful. But what I would like to point out a little bit, especially to take the idea of what very worshipful Michael and actually Bill as well noted to, that the system is a little bit incomplete. It is an initiatory system, Freemasonry, but is not very developed, like very worshipful Michael said, because it's not dogmatic. But that situation put us in a situation where we're asking ourselves and the new initiate to discover the wheel, discover the path, and then do the labor of taking that wheel from the rough ashlar to the perfect ashlar. Of course, it is not going to happen in one lifetime. So that's also because we have very few brothers really are able to articulate what is the path, because it's hidden in those stories. And the ritual tells us, find the teacher. And unfortunately, we have very few teachers today that are willing to point out specifically what is I would say that there is a very specific practice that can be chosen. It's not the only one, obviously. The ritual is very rich, but there is a very practice. And like Brother Jason said, it is brotherly love, relief in terms of compassion, truth, but here truth, like the ritual says, is the rejoicing with each other's prosperity and the cardinal virtues. And if we focus on those and we actually practice them, not theoretically, but we really can talk to brothers